Welcome! You're listening to the Uncharted Lancaster Podcast, where we explore the hidden histories, forgotten places, and long-buried secrets of Lancaster County. Using modern digital storytelling tools, each episode brings a new piece of local lore to life, revealing the strange, the surprising, and the stories history left behind. Let's begin.
Okay, let's just jump right in. When you think of hairy hominids, cryptids, your brain immediately goes to the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, absolutely. Sasquatch country, or maybe the Himalayas for the Yeti. You think of these giant lumbering creatures.
The big guys, the monsters. But today we're doing something a little different. We're taking a hard turn and heading straight for Pennsylvania, Dutch country.
Yeah, to look at a creature that is, well, it's just as hairy and just as elusive, but it's shorter. A lot skinnier, and it seems to be obsessed with apples.
We are doing a deep dive into the sources you sent over, and they map out this incredible legend, complete with surprisingly consistent modern sightings of the Albatwitch.
And you have to forget the giant monster image. This is Pennsylvania's own little Bigfoot. It's almost always reported as being only about 4 feet tall.
And it's centered right around the Susquehanna River region. So our goal here really is to get past the campfire stories and actually look at what the sources say.
Right. We need to figure out what the Albatwitch is. I mean, is it just some, cute local folklore? Or is it something more?
Like a real undocumented primate. Some people think so.
Or, and this is where it gets really strange, some of our sources suggest it might be something else. Maybe a spirit that can somehow leave physical traces.
And we have to start at the absolute epicenter of the legend, Chickies Rock. This spot along the Susquehanna is so important.
It's everything.
Yeah.
The creature is so tied to this place that its name is this bizarre linguistic mashup of Pennsylvania, Dutch, English, and even Old German.
All because this little cryptid apparently couldn't keep its hands off the picnics people were having in the 1800s.
And the detail that I think really sets this deep dive apart from the start is just how specific the reports are. We're not talking about blurry shapes in the woods.
No, not at all. We're talking about accounts that describe, piercing yellow eyes, a hooded nose, and a very distinct smell that shows up after the creature has already vanished.
Exactly. So those characteristics, they immediately separate it from its bigger cousin, Bigfoot.
Yeah.
It forces us to think in entirely new categories, both biological and maybe even paranormal.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's define exactly what people are claiming to see.
So let's begin with the physical description. I mean, that little Bigfoot nickname really says it all. The sources are incredibly consistent on its size.
And that consistency is huge, right? It's key to establishing that this isn't just a misidentified bear or something.
It is. We're always talking about something small, usually between 3 and 5 feet tall, but so often the number that comes up is 4 feet, right around 4 feet.
That 4-foot average is such a crucial detail. In cryptozoology, if you hear 6 or 7 feet, you file it under Bigfoot or maybe a juvenile Sasquatch.
Right.
But 4 feet consistently, that suggests a totally different species or something else entirely.
Precisely. It immediately makes the juvenile Sasquatch theory a lot harder for investigators to swallow. Because the Albatwitch isn't just small. Its proportions are different. It's consistently described as being, skinnier, more human-like than the big, barrel-chested Bigfoot we hear about out west.
I remember one witness, Rick Fisher, we'll definitely come back to his story. He described the figure he saw as stick-thin.
Stick-thin, yeah. Even though it's covered in hair. That suggests a very lean build, not the powerful, heavy frame you'd expect from a hominid cryptid.
It's a really different silhouette.
And another thing witnesses mentioned is a noticeable neck. That's another big differentiator.
Oh, that's interesting. Because the classic Bigfoot image is that cone-shaped head that just sits right on the shoulders. No real neck to speak of.
Exactly. The Albatwitch is described as slender enough to have a more human-like structure, just, covered in dark or black hair.
Okay, so we've got small, thin, dark hair. But the feature that seems to really burn itself into every witness's memory, it's the eyes.
The eyes are always the focus of the encounter. They're described as dark, piercing, giving it this intense, maybe intelligent look.
But it's the reflection that's key. When a light hits them,
they glow. And specifically, 2 yellow eyes. That detail comes up again and again.
That yellow is so specific. Most nocturnal animals around here, deer or raccoons, they give off that greenish or reddish-white eyeshine.
Right, from the tapetum lucidum.
Yeah. Yellow is much less common. It just adds this really eerie, almost predatory feel to the whole thing.
It creates an image you just can't shake. And if we look at the most recent sighting, the one from Fishing Creek in April 2024, the witness gave us even more to work with on the face.
Okay, let's pause on that because this is where the details really start to get strange and hard to classify.
So the witness said the face looked like a monkey's, which, okay, that might point you toward that escaped primate theory.
Right.
But then they added that the face was pale, almost off-white, and it had a very distinct, almost human-like hooded nose.
A pale face? That's hard to square with most wild primates, which usually have darker skin. And it definitely doesn't fit with the typical Bigfoot descriptions.
And the hooded nose part is fascinating. That term usually means a nose that, projects a bit with a slight curve down at the tip. That's not typical for any monkey species, Old World or New World.
They usually have much flatter, broader noses.
Yeah.
So if this thing is a descendant of an escaped circus monkey, it has evolved incredibly quickly to get a pale face and a hooded nose.
Either that or we're looking at something totally unknown. That one anatomical detail, the nose, really challenges that simple explanation.
It just raises more questions than it answers, really. It highlights how unique this thing is, which I think is a perfect pivot to its behavior, which is just as weird.
And it's the behavior that gives it its name and its fame.
The apple obsession. Every source is clear. It's a name for its habit of stealing apples. It is the original apple snitch.
Yes, and this goes all the way back to the 1800s. The Albatwitch is fundamentally tied to Chickies Rock, where Victorian families would go for picnics, often with, barrels of apples.
And the story is the creature would sneak in, grab the fruit, and then if it got disturbed, it would get aggressive.
And the aggression is so specific. It's almost, like you said, childlike. It doesn't roar or charge.
It throws the apples at you.
It pelts people with the fruit or the cores. The stories from the 1800s and modern lore both mention it. If you get too close, it hurls the leftovers back at you. It's this very particular kind of territorial mischief.
It really sounds like a grumpy, hairy teenager who just wants to eat his lunch in peace and will absolutely hit you with a bruised apple if you bother him.
A very, very elusive, grumpy teenager, too, because its movements are almost as strange as its looks. It's often spotted up in trees, only coming down for food.
But its signature move is the vanishing act. That's what really defines it.
It seems impossible. In that 2002 sighting with Rick Fisher, the source says it vanished right there in the middle of the road. How does a solid 4-foot-tall creature just stop existing in plain sight?
And the 2024 sighting had another example of that. The witness said it ducked behind a tree, barely a foot wide.
Which is just an impossible hiding spot for something of that size, even crouched down. This ability to disappear is probably the strongest argument for that spiritual theory we'll get into.
But there was more than just visual evidence in 2024, right? There was powerful sensory stuff, too. The smell.
Yes. In that Fishing Creek sighting, the witnesses first heard these unnerving noises, and then came the smell. A distinct, wet dog odor.
And it lingered.
It lingered. It was so strong that the witness's companion, who didn't even see the creature, confirmed this foul smell was hanging in the air. That kind of pungent odor is reported with cryptid sightings all over the world.
So where does this thing live? We know the anchor is Chickies Rock, right along the Susquehanna.
That's the primary residence, the historical heart of the legend. Chickies Rock is this huge, heavily wooded area just north of Columbia, Pennsylvania. It's got dense cover, elevation. It's a perfect hiding spot.
But the sightings aren't just there.
No, not at all. The sources document them in nearby places like Marietta, Wrightsville, which is just across the river in York County, and of course the 2024 encounter at the Fishing Creek Nature Preserve.
So it seems to have a whole territory along that stretch of the river valley, moving between Lancaster and York counties.
It does, but Chickies Rock remains the key, probably because it was a hub of human activity, the picnics, and it's also just incredibly dense wilderness.
What's so wild is how localized this all is, but at the same time, it has these ancient connections that tie it to much, much older cultures. We need to dive into that history next. The story of the name alone is almost as weird as the creature.
So the legend as we know it today is really tied to the European settlers who came in the 1800s, specifically to that spot at Chickies Rock. It was a popular place for them.
Right. That's the classic origin story. This creature that terrorized picnickers by stealing their apples and then, throwing oars back at them. And that specific behavior is what led to the most common theory about its name.
Yes. which is where we have to start. The name Albatwitch is this linguistic puzzle. It seems to have 3 different layers of origin, reflecting the different cultures there: the Pennsylvania Dutch, the English, and the German.
Okay, let's start with the simplest, most common theory.
That would be that it's just a Pennsylvania Dutch and English compound word for apple snitch.
Which makes perfect sense. A creature that snitches apples, it's very literal. Over time, apple snitch just gets corrupted into Albatwitch.
It's a very logical, straightforward path. But the sources suggest a much deeper linguistic root, one that goes back to the German heritage of the area.
And that's the one that really gives weight to the whole spiritual or paranormal theory.
Absolutely. If you look at the German origins, the name suddenly takes on these ancient meanings. The sources mention interpretations like apple elf, elf spirit, or even gliding, escaping elf.
And this all ties back to the German word Alb.
Alb, yes. Alb is German for elf. But we have to be really clear what that meant in classical German folklore. It's not the friendly, helpful elf you see in modern stories.
Right. This is a much darker concept.
It's a crucial distinction. In old Germanic folklore, the Alb, or Alp, was often a mischievous or even malevolent night spirit. It's actually the root of our word nightmare.
The Mar or Alb sitting on your chest in your sleep.
Exactly. So we're talking about a creature that's inherently tied to darkness, mischief, sometimes torment.
A spirit entity.
Yes. And the theory is that the Pennsylvania Germans who settled there, who were steeped in these old world traditions, encountered this strange fruit-stealing creature in the woods. They might have reached for an old country term, like Alb, to describe it.
So from the very beginning, they weren't seeing it as an animal. They saw it as a magical, spiritual entity.
It's very possible. It completely changes the context. He goes from being a hairy thief to being a literal elf or spirit from the woods, which sets the stage perfectly for the competing theories we need to get into.
But the history doesn't stop with the German settlers in the 1800s. We have to go back even further to the Native American connections, and this might be the most important historical detail of all.
This is maybe the most compelling piece of evidence that the creature is more than just a prank or a misidentification. We're talking about the Susquehannocks.
The local tribe whose main village and burial grounds were found right at the base of Chickies Rock, the heartland of the legend.
And what's astonishing, according to local lore, is the visual connection. The sources say the Susquehannocks painted images on their war shields that matched the description of these small, ape-like creatures.
Just think about what that means for a second. The Susquehannock language is lost, so we'll never know what they called it.
But the fact that a tribe in Pennsylvania, a place with no native apes, no monkeys, 0 large primates, was depicting small ape-like figures on their shields is just, it's extraordinary.
The implication is massive. It means the creature was here, and it was recognizable long before any European settlers or circuses showed up. It pushes the whole timeline back centuries. So, if it's not a native primate, what were they painting?
It creates this fascinating puzzle. Were they painting a real unknown primate that is, in fact, endemic to that region? Or were they depicting a spirit, a little person that just happens to look like a primate?
And we just don't know. The ambiguity is what keeps the mystery alive.
And it wasn't just the Susquehannocks. There are connections to the wider Algonquin-speaking groups who had tales of a similar creature.
Right, the Migoumawissou.
The Migoumawissous, a small, hairy hominid known for mischief and strange behavior. It suggests the idea of a small, secretive, hairy entity is woven deep into the indigenous history of that whole region.
So it's not just a localized myth that popped up around stolen apples.
Not at all. Whether you call it Migoumawissous, the German Alb, or the Albatwitch, this core concept of a small, elusive, hairy figure in those woods has been around for a very, very long time.
And that really adds a lot of weight to the modern encounters, which we need to get into now, because these aren't just old tales. People are seeing this creature today.
Yeah.
The legend might go back to the 1800s, but it's the modern, well-documented encounters that really keep the Albatwitch in the cryptid category, not just in the folklore file.
And the most significant of those modern sightings happened in 2002.
This is the one documented by the paranormal researcher Rick Fisher in his book, Ghosts of the River Towns.
Yes. And this event is really seen as the modern gold standard for an Albatwitch encounter, mostly because of Fisher's credibility as a researcher and just how dramatic the whole thing was.
So let's set the scene, because the atmosphere here is so important. It's early morning, 6 a.m., it's Valentine's Day 2002, and it's freezing cold.
And Fisher is driving up Route 23 near Marietta, which is just a stone's throw from Chickies Rock.
Wait.
It's a lonely, dark, heavily wooded road.
He sees a figure in the middle of the road and slows down. His first thought is that it's a small child.
Which, again, confirms that small stature. He thinks it's a kid who needs help. But as he gets closer, he realizes, with this, mounting dread, that it's not a child.
What did he see in that moment before the climax of the event?
He described a stick-thin figure, about 5 feet tall, covered with hair. Just a completely alien sight. It was walking upright, but with this strange, unnatural gait.
And he's close at this point.
Very close. He's driving slow, maybe only 15 or 20 feet away, just trying to process what he's looking at on this empty road at dawn.
And this is where the tension just maxes out. He needs to see it better to confirm what he's seeing, so he flips on his high beams.
In that instant, the creature turns toward his car. Their eyes meet. And all Fisher remembers are those 2 intense yellow eyes reflecting back at him. A moment of just pure, raw recognition.
That whatever this thing was, it was aware, intelligent, and completely unnerving.
And then the signature move. The vanishing act. The source is so clear that it vanished right there in the middle of the road.
It didn't run off into the woods.
No, it didn't bolt. It didn't jump the guardrail. It just ceased to be visible in his headlights.
Wow.
That event was so profoundly impactful for him. He later said he didn't sleep for a couple of months. It was this deep personal encounter that he documented extensively.
And for him, it cemented the Albatwitch as a genuine mystery, one that needs a pretty unconventional explanation, given that impossible disappearance.
Absolutely. That sighting is so critical because it's a recent, credible account that perfectly matches all the historical details. Mm-hmm. Small, hairy, skinny, those yellow eyes, and that ability to just disappear.
But the story doesn't end in 2002. We have the sighting from 2024, which adds a whole new layer of sensory detail.
The Fishing Creek sighting from April 2024, it adds incredible texture to the lore. The whole thing started not with a sight, but with a sound, these strange, unnerving noises from across the creek.
And then the smell came.
And then that lingering, unmistakable smell. The distinct, wet dog odor that just hung in the air all evening.
And consistent with the old apple-throwing stories, the witnesses even thought something was hurled at them.
Right. They didn't see what it was, but they felt something was thrown in their direction. It suggests this active engagement, maybe a warning to back off.
But the visual is what ties it all together. The witness saw a face peering out from behind a tree.
Very thin tree, barely a foot wide.
We talked about this, the pale, monkey-like face, the hooded nose. The witness estimated it was only about 3 feet high while it was crouched, again, reinforcing that small size.
And as soon as it was spotted, it vanished. It just ducked behind that impossibly thin tree and was gone. The witness's companion, who didn't see it, did confirm the smell was there.
So the consistency of the smell in the vanishing act, it really reinforces this idea that we're dealing with something that doesn't operate like a normal animal.
And the investigation after the fact is just as important. Rick Fisher actually went to the site to see if there was any physical evidence left behind.
What did you find?
Well, he confirmed the exact spot where it hid, but the ground was just too packed and hard to get any clear, definitive tracks.
It's frustrating.
Very. He found some small depressions near the creek, maybe heel prints or partial footprints, but they led absolutely nowhere. They just stopped.
That's the classic Albatwitch contradiction. It leaves just enough evidence to prove it was there, and then it's gone. If it were a kid or a monkey, you'd expect a continuous track line.
Exactly. The lack of continuous tracks is the defining feature here. He did find one small 7-inch barefoot print about a half-mile away, but he noted it could have just been from a child. And they found some bones near the parking lot, which just adds a layer of creepiness without really proving anything.
What's so amazing is that the physical evidence was so inconclusive, but the report itself, the height, the smell, the vanishing, the throwing behavior, it aligns perfectly with the Albatwitch profile that was established decades earlier.
It suggests that whatever this thing is, it operates on a very predictable but scientifically baffling pattern.
And we should be clear, these aren't just a couple of isolated incidents.
Not at all. The sources mention other historical sightings of man-like figures in that area, at Chickies Rock in the 50s and 70s, and other reports of hairy humanoids in nearby towns in 1973.
So there's this ongoing pattern of encounters in that very specific part of the Susquehanna River Valley. The Albatwitch is a very persistent local mystery.
Which brings us to the really hard question. What is it? We have to move into the competing theories now because the researchers and the witnesses themselves are completely divided.
Okay, so when you have a cryptid that's seen this consistently but leaves behind so little hard evidence, you're naturally going to get a lot of competing theories. Everyone's trying to fit it into a box they can understand.
And the first theory tries to do that using biology and history. It's looking for a logical, physical origin for a small, hairy, ape-like creature in Pennsylvania.
This is Theory A, the escapee primate hypothesis. This one is put forward by Chris Vera, who is one of the organizers of Albatwitch Day.
Right. And Vera's theory is all about the historical context of that region. He points out that Columbia, Pennsylvania was a really popular stop for traveling circuses back in the 1800s.
We're talking big ones, right? Like Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey.
The biggest? They would travel through there. And the idea is, it's not impossible that they could have lost an animal. Or maybe even released one.
So the theory is that a couple of primates, maybe a small, hardy species of monkey, escaped and managed to survive and breed in the woods around Chickies Rock.
That's the core of it.
But I have to ask, how could a small population of non-native primates survive the freezing Pennsylvania winters for over 150 years without, more sightings or even roadkill?
That is the big challenge to the theory. And Vera tries to address it with an adaptation argument. He suggests that a wild-born population would have to adapt. They'd grow much longer, thicker hair to survive the cold.
And that would create the hairy hominid appearance.
Yeah.
What about the stick-thin build that Rick Fisher described?
Vera argues that would be natural, too. They'd be much skinnier because of the constant struggle for nutrition, foraging to survive. That could explain the lean physique.
And their love of apples could be explained by them living near humans and just going for the easiest source of calories.
Exactly. It's a really compelling, totally naturalistic explanation for the phenomenon. The big hole in it, though, is it still doesn't explain the vanishing acts.
And it definitely doesn't explain the pale face and the hooded nose, which, as we said, don't really line up with common circus animals. Still, it's a physical explanation. Others believe the answer is entirely paranormal.
Which brings us to Theory B, the spirit manifestation. This is the idea championed by paranormal researcher Timothy Reiner.
And he just completely dismisses the idea that the Albatwitch has to be a flesh and blood animal. He thinks it's a spirit.
Specifically, a local version of the little people, which is a concept you find in folklore all over the world, from European sprites to indigenous entities.
This connects right back to that German Alblore, suggesting this long cultural history of believing in small, non-human entities in the woods.
Renner's analysis here is really interesting because he draws a parallel between the Albatwitch and how some Native American cultures view Bigfoot.
You mean his conversations with the Lakota people? How does that connect to a 4-foot apple thief in Pennsylvania?
Well, it helps solve what Renner calls the Western problem. He says when he talks to the Lakota about Bigfoot, they'll say, oh yeah, it's here. We see it. It's 100% real. But then they'll often define it as a spirit.
And the Western problem is our logical hang-up. How can a non-physical spirit leave physical evidence, like footprints or hair or that wet dog smell?
Exactly. Our scientific mindset demands physical proof for physical existence. But Renner points out that cultures that are, more familiar with the reality of spirits, they have no problem with the idea of a spirit manifesting a physical form when it needs to.
So the spirit can become physical long enough to leave a heel print or get seen in your headlights, and then it can just dissolve or move dimensionally, which would explain how it could vanish right there in the middle of the road.
And why the 2024 tracks just stopped and led nowhere. This perspective also lets Renner push back on the biological theory. He questions how a stable breeding population of primates could really exist in those woods for a century and a half without leaving more conclusive evidence.
For him, the lack of proof is actually proof for the spirit theory.
Right. Only a non-physical entity could be that consistently elusive.
It's a fascinating theory, even if it's a challenging one to wrap your head around. Okay, so what's the third theory? This is the most skeptical one, right? The idea that it's all just a joke.
This is Theory C, the folklore prank gone wild. This was proposed by Tyler Huber, who connected it to another Pennsylvania German folklore creature, the Albatwitch.
But wait, the Albatwitch is completely different. The sources say it's like a weird bird-salmon hybrid with teeth. It sounds nothing like a hairy hominid.
You're absolutely right. The physical descriptions don't match at all. The connection is purely linguistic, and it's tied to a local tradition.
The Albatwitch was the subject of a prank, like a snipe hunt.
Exactly. A popular prank in that area in the late 1800s and early 1900s. You'd send someone out into the woods to hunt the Albatwitch, And then you just leave them there while you made crazy noises from the darkness.
So Huber's theory is that the name Albatwitch might just be a corruption of Albatwitch.
Or Albatwitch hunt, yeah. The name sounds similar enough. Albatwitch. And since that prank, that tradition of Albert hunting, was so ingrained in the local culture, it's possible that when people did see something strange and hairy, they just applied the name they already knew.
It's a neat theory for the name's origin, but it doesn't explain the centuries-old Susquehanna imagery or the very consistent modern sightings.
It doesn't. And that's really the genius of this whole Albatwitch mystery. Whether the name comes from apple snitch or the German Alb or a prank about an Albatwitch, the core mystery is still there. People are seeing something.
And that persistent reality has led to this huge cultural celebration.
So, regardless of what it is, a spirit, a primate, a legend, the Albatwitch has clearly become this genuine cultural phenomenon in Pennsylvania. It's celebrated by hundreds of people every year.
And the ultimate expression of that is Albatwitch Day, the festival they hold every October. It sounds less like a stuffy conference and more like a regional pilgrimage for the curious.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
And the sources track its growth. It started out in Columbia, right near Chickies Rock, the creature's spiritual home. But it got so popular they had to move it.
Right. It moved to Wrightsville Riverfront Park in York County for its 12th year. That's just across the river. Was there a reason for the move besides just needing more space?
The space was the main reason, but the organizers were very strategic about it. They wanted to accommodate the growing crowds, but they also didn't want to abandon the legend's origin.
How'd they manage that?
The organizer, Chris Vera, he was very clear that he wanted to give business to both sides of the river, Columbia and Wrightsville. He said the bridge unites us as one. So the legend is seen as this shared heritage for the entire river valley.
That's pretty cool. So what's the vibe like at the festival? The sources describe it as this big community gathering for paranormal fans.
Think of it like a really local version of the Mothman Festival in West Virginia. You've got lectures from experts like Timothy Rayner and Chris Vera who are discussing the very theories we've just been talking about.
And live music, food, merch.
All of it. T-shirts, artwork, memorabilia. It's a true celebration.
And people are coming from all over for it, which suggests that there's a real hunger for these unique local mysteries.
That's right. People travel from New York, Maryland, New Jersey. It's become a regional magnet for anyone interested in the strange side of history and folklore. And it also points to this interesting shift happening in cryptozoology.
You mean the idea that these smaller, more unique cryptids are starting to get more attention than Bigfoot?
That's an insight from Chris Vera, who's right in the middle of this community. He said that little cryptids, like the Albatwitch, are taking over more of Bigfoot in terms of public excitement and even the frequency of investigations.
That makes a lot of sense. When you think about it, there are so many Bigfoot groups out there and so little new definitive evidence. People are drawn to these local legends where the stories are fresh and deeply tied to the history of a place.
The Albatwitch has this unique narrative. It connects Victorian picnics, German folklore, and ancient Susquehanna history. It's so accessible and personally relevant to that community.
As one attendee said, it's the combination of the ancient artifacts and the continuous modern sightings that makes the legend feel so real and so worth celebrating.
Exactly. At the end of the day, the cultural phenomenon itself is proof that whether or not the creature is physically real, the story of the creature is 100% real and deeply important to the people who live there. So after all that, what does it all mean? We've done our deep dive into the sources on Pennsylvania's little Bigfoot, the Albatwitch.
We've laid out all the key features: that small stature, 3 to 5 feet tall, that stick-thin build. We have the signature yellow eyes, the dark hair, and those impossible vanishing acts from the 2002 and 2024 sightings.
And of course, that strange historical connection to apples and Chickies Rock that gave the creature its complex name.
We also dissected the 3 competing theories in detail: the natural explanation of an escaped circus primate, the spiritual one of an alb or little person that can manifest physically,
and the folklore theory that the name just came from an old Pennsylvania German prank.
But the one thing that's undeniable is how powerfully real these stories are to the people who've had these experiences. We've learned the Albatwitch legend is this fascinating lens for looking at local history, connecting Victorian picnics to ancient Susquehanna lore.
And it's that indigenous connection that leaves us with the ultimate provocative thought for you, the learner, to really chew on.
We know the Susquehanna people were in Pennsylvania with no native apes, no contact with primates from other continents. Their language is lost. Their depictions were made centuries before any Europeans showed up.
So what unknown creature were they painting on their war shields at the base of Chickies Rock that so perfectly matches the description of the small, hairy, apple-snitching, ape-like Albatwitch?
It really makes you wonder what else is out there hiding in those wooded riverbanks. Something that has just learned over centuries how to vanish the second the high beams come on. Something to think about next time you're near the Susquehanna.
Or maybe, more to the point, next time you're taking an apple on a picnic near Chickies Rock.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Uncharted Lancaster Podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating or review wherever you listen. It really helps more people discover the show. For more fascinating local history, visit unchartedlancaster.com. And if you'd like to go deeper, check out one of Adam Zern's books at unchartedlancaster.com/books. Until next time, keep exploring.